At various points over the last few weeks, I don't know when I would backdate it to. Maybe the Boston College game, probably after the Florida State game, actually, is when I would look back. And I would, as we got into conversations about the possibility of Pitt getting to this point right now at 7-2 overall and 5-1 in the ACC, coming upon an off week with those three big games to finish the 2025 regular season schedule. At various points as we would talk about that, and I think it was really after the Florida State game when I started talking a little bit more about it. And certainly we have in the last 3 weeks had that conversation a lot. There will be times where I kind of caught myself and thought, you know what, you are getting a little bit ahead of yourself here. And I'm not the type that says, we got to stay focused on this game. It doesn't matter what I focus on. You and I can talk about whether or not we should be booking our plane trips to Charlotte. It doesn't matter if you and I could be talking about Georgia Tech, and you and I could be talking about how Pitt matches up with Miami. It doesn't matter. We could have had those conversations prior to the Stanford game. Like if Pitt had lost at Stanford, it wouldn't have been because I wrote 2 articles that were not about the matchups. That one article was about history and one was about travel logistics and things like that. It was, it doesn't matter if I take my eyes off the prize. It's the players and the coaches who need to stay focused. But I still wondered sometimes if we would end up looking back and be like, you idiot. You remember when you were talking about them potentially being 7-2 and they would actually be, 5-4 or something like that. But week by week, they just kept chipping away. They kept knocking teams off. They blew out Boston College. They won a 3-point game that really could have been a 10-point win at Florida State. They went to Syracuse, played a pretty poor game offensively, and survived for a 17-point win. They came back home and blew out NC State. And then in the capper, they went to Stanford on Saturday and won a game by 15. It should have been by 22. The last touchdown came against reserves, which was also the case against Boston College, and I think it was also the case with NC State as well, that you get the backups giving up a touchdown late that makes the game seem even closer than it was. Pitt was in control from start to finish on Saturday. And now the Panthers are here in November with an off week and 3 giant games down the stretch, having done everything they could do and needed to do over the last 5 games to make these games count. And if I've had one theory or theme or narrative or storyline, it's about winning here to make these games in November matter, to make these games in November worth something, because it's been 4 years since games in November actually mattered for this team. And here they are. They took care of business. They did what they needed to do against Boston College and Syracuse and NC State and Stanford. They got the win at Florida State to cap it off, to really add to it. They're 7-2. They're 5-1 in the ACC. And they've got everything to play for in these final 3 games. What a place to be. Nobody would have imagined it after the loss to Louisville. But here they are. After what it was probably the biggest blowout of a 15-point win that we've seen. And it's remarkable that this team, when they've had their struggles or made their mistakes in the last 5 games, their worst performances have led to a 17-point win and a 15-point win, both on the road. Another 300-yard game for Mason Heichel, breakout game for Jakarian Turner, another good one for Kenny Johnson, another impressive defensive performance, more reserves stepping up and making big plays. This team's rolling right now, and they get a week to get healthy before they head into Notre Dame and those final 2 ACC games. What a time to be alive, Pitt fans. What a time to be alive. Let's talk about that game on Saturday, everything we saw, everything we learned, and what we think about this team heading into the bye week here on the Monday edition of the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, I don't mean to repeat my own talking points and come back to things that I said a bunch of times, but I mean, before the season, or maybe in the first week of the season or something like that, I think I wrote in a 3-2-1 column, the 4 most important games. Or I think I did it on a Morning Pitt, and I would have to look back and see if it was during August or after 1 week. That the 4 most important games on the schedule were Boston College, Syracuse, NC State, and Stanford. That those were the games that ultimately are the ones that kind of decide what your season is going to be. If it's a season where you're actually playing for something and trying to win to achieve at a higher level, or where you're playing to just try to win to get to bowl eligibility. That if you waste one of those games, you put yourself behind. You know that you're going to beat Duquesne and Central Michigan. West Virginia and Louisville, I think I felt before the season were toss-ups, games that Pitt could win or maybe should win, one more than the other perhaps, but I thought they were somewhat of toss-ups for a variety of reasons. Florida State would probably be a game Pitt should win, but that would be, it's a tough one on the road, and obviously these final three are tough. So you got to get these 4 games here, these 4 most important games, Boston College, Syracuse, NC State, and Stanford. So you win those 4, add them to the first 2, and now you're at 6 wins. So you're not trying to beat West Virginia on the road. You're not trying to beat Georgia Tech on the road. You're not trying to close the regular season against Miami, just trying to get to 6 wins. You give yourself that baseline with these sort of foundation wins, and then anything you do above and beyond, any other wins that you get in the other 6 games, it's adding to that. You're not trying to get to bowl eligibility by beating Notre Dame. You're already there. You're trying to win 8, win 9, win 10, depending on what you've done earlier in the season. And obviously, Pitt wasted opportunities against West Virginia and Louisville. There's no question about it. That Louisville game in particular is haunting them a little bit. We had that mailbag question on Friday about which win would you rather Pitt, which win would have helped Pitt more, and the answer was Louisville. And as we look at the ACC standings now, that's the game that's holding Pitt back. I mean, they would control their own destiny if they had taken care of business against Louisville. They did not, and so they don't. They still have a lot to say about their own destiny, but they don't control it. They're going to need help from outside forces, and at some point we will try to do the beautiful mind math and write all over the walls with all the various ACC scenarios. But the most important thing is that you just keep winning. They wasted those 2 games, though, wasted opportunities in those 2 games, though, but they have been perfect since. Certainly in terms of the record, if not always in terms of performance, they've been perfect since. And Saturday's game was such an interesting demonstration from this team where they controlled the game. Like they controlled the game. They were in charge from the start. They, get the stop on 4th down, open the game, and then, turn it right into a touchdown. And they were never really, Stanford never really threatened in this game. Like NC State, I feel like threatened a little bit more 2 weeks ago. Stanford never really threatened in this game. And when Stanford scored, they got their first field goal when Braylon Lovelace dropped an interception. They got their first touchdown on like a fluky thing where Rashad Battle had the ball hit his hands. It tips off his hands and goes to the receiver, who goes 35 yards for a touchdown. So, I mean, Stanford scored 20 points. Their first 10 came off of plays that Pitt should have intercepted. And their final 7 came against Pitt's backups. So, weird fluky stuff kind of made the score closer than the game actually was, or, made it closer than the game felt like. But it never really felt like Pitt was in danger here. I could never really manufacture any real concern. And eventually Pitt did start getting the interceptions. They got, it wasn't on the 4th drive, the 3rd drive or the 4th drive. Stanford scored the touchdown on their 3rd drive. They punted on their 4th drive. But on the 5th drive, Javon McIntyre got his first interception since the Sun Bowl in 2022. How about that? Javon McIntyre going 3 years, 2 full seasons, plus the first 8 games this year without an interception. He finally gets one, his first pick since then. Then the next drive, Kyle Lewis gets an interception. Pitt's offense couldn't turn either one of those interceptions into points. And so Sean Lee Jr. steps up and scores his own touchdown on the next interception. He gets a pick 6, his first career interception. Sean Lee Jr. playing at a really high level. And there's a lot of areas you could look at with this game. There's a lot of things you could point to. And we'll talk about some of the defensive reserves in a second. But you start with Mason Heinchel, 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. His 4th time getting 300-plus yards and multiple passing touchdowns. 4th time in his 5 career starts. Obviously, pretty impressive there. But he did have 2 interceptions. Both were pretty bad. Both were in the end zone. The first one, just not a great idea to be throwing in that situation anyway. I think you had 1st and goal at the 9. You get like an 8-yard run on 1st down. Now you're, or 7-yard run or something like that. So you're 2nd and goal from the 1 or the 2. There's no need to throw there. Heinchel scrambles and tries to throw to Deuce Spann, but there's a defender, covering him well. You either need to throw that ball away or maybe just hand it off. And then the second one, I think it was a really nice pass. It was a really nice play design. It was a great route by Raphael Williams running into the end zone. And Mason Heichel made the right read. He was just a beat too slow. A beat behind, a tick too slow. He needed to get the pass out sooner. And he probably would have had a touchdown. Instead, he gets picked off in the end zone. Neither one of those interceptions really hurt Pitt. They were already comfortably ahead at that point. Excuse me. I'm trying to see. Sean Lee Jr.'s touchdown was in the third quarter. So, I mean, Pitt was probably up 35-13 at that point when Heichel threw those two interceptions. And so it didn't really hurt. It didn't feel that bad. But, I mean, there were still mistakes, They were still errors on Mason Heichel's part. Partially, I think Cade Bell takes a little bit of the blame, at least for the first one. And then you have the two fumbles from Mason Heichel. Both times it seemed like it felt like it could have been targeting on both calls. He got hit in the helmet. The second one, some kind of weird busted play where Heichel ends up running the ball on Pitt's final possession of the game. Not a great idea for him to be running in that situation. That was his second rushing attempt on the drive. Not a great idea, really, for him to be on the field at all in that situation. With Pitt up 35-13, in the final 8 minutes of the fourth quarter, there was really no need for Mason Heichel to be playing, but that's just me. What do I know? He ends up making some mistakes there. I think Mason Heichel, the key with Mason Heichel is through his 5 starts, you have seen him make mistakes at various points, and almost every one I feel like he has learned from. I don't think we've seen Mason Heichel make the same mistake twice from our 1,000-foot view from the press box, not really having, not knowing the film and the play design and the reads and all those different things. It feels to me like when I've seen him make a mistake, I haven't seen him do that same mistake again. I always point to the example of the Florida State game. When on back-to-back third downs, he tried to force the ball downfield or push the ball downfield and ended up getting picked off twice. And then the next time he had a third down, a 3rd and 6, he checks it down to Desmond Reed for 5 yards, and Reed gets 50 out of it. I think Mason Heichel learned in that situation. He went to Syracuse, and I think he made some mistakes up there and learned a little bit about checking down and not being the hero, as Pat Narduzzi put it. And I think he played better in the NC State game as a result of those lessons. I think there were lessons from the NC State game that he took into the game on Saturday at Stanford, and there are lessons he'll take from that game when they host Notre Dame at home. I think it's interesting. Heichel has thrown 5 interceptions this season. All 5 have been on the road. He had 2 at Florida State, 1 at Syracuse, and then 2 on Saturday. None of his interceptions have been thrown at home. That's kind of interesting. I don't know if there's much to make of that. I tend to not get too deep in the home road splits with quarterbacks like that, unless there's some extenuating circumstance like you play at home in a dome or something like that. But I think it's interesting to note that he's not thrown an interception at home yet. Perhaps I just jinxed him for the Notre Dame game. I guess we'll find out in a couple of weeks. But overall, Heichel made some huge throws, obviously 4 bad mistakes, but some huge throws, some big-time plays, and another just really strong game from him. The other freshman who had a really strong game, and there were a few of them, was Jakarian Turner. Turner was outstanding in this game. 163 yards of offense in total, 163 all-purpose yards, 22 carries for 127, 3 catches for 36 yards. He's the first Pitt running back with a 100-yard rushing game since Des Reed had, I think, 169 against Toledo last year. And the last time a Pitt running back had a 100-yard game against a Power 4 opponent was when Reed ran for 120 against Cal last season. So it's been more than a year, more than one calendar year since a Pitt running back had a 100-yard rushing game, and Jakarian Turner looked really good doing it. He's also got, I think, 518 all-purpose yards now. He's the first Pitt freshman to get 500 all-purpose yards since Kenny Johnson in 2023 had, I forget his exact number. He finished the season like less than 600. The last time a Pitt freshman had 600 all-purpose yards in a season was Jordan Addison in 2020. He had, I think, 778 that year, and he was returning kicks and punts in addition to the receiving. But those numbers, Jakarian Turner with 518 already through 9 games. I mean, I think, 700, 800 is very much in target for him through the 12 regular season games and the bowl game. And ideally, Desmond Reed is ready to go against Notre Dame and as close to 100% as he could possibly be. As close as anybody who's missed multiple games is going to be when you're going into game number 10 of the regular season. And ideally, you'll be able to ride Desmond Reed and get him active and throw him passes and have him making plays. But you've got another guy in number 25. You've got a guy in Jakarian Turner, and he's right there on the screen, who can make plays for you. When he gets outside, he's dangerous. Almost as dangerous as Reed, if not more so. And I think he seems a little stronger than Desmond Reed. And that's not to say Desmond Reed is not strong. Neither one of them are very big. But he seems to have a knack to get around tackles, get out of tackles. He doesn't do as well when you run him between the tackles, although his big 37-yard run was up the middle. He had a nice big hole to run through there. But I just think he looks really, really good. And I think he looks good enough that you don't need Desmond Reed to play 75 snaps against Notre Dame or at Georgia Tech or against Miami. That you can get something closer to, I don't know if you're going to go 50-50 split between Reed and Turner, but I think Turner has looked, he just had 163 yards against a Power 4 opponent on the road. So he can do the job. He can go out and make plays and help you win games. And I think deploying the two of them, who knows? They've got an extra week off. Maybe you could put them on the field together. But deploying the two of them in some kind of rotation, I think is really, really dangerous for Pitt's opponents. And I think that, Turner has more than earned a healthy workload going forward. Receivers, Kenny Johnson had another really good game, although he seemed to get banged up again. Raphael Williams is just, he's just outstanding. I think he's got at least 4 catches in 7 out of 9 games this year. Raphael Williams, I owe him every apology in the world. I totally disrespected his game in the offseason. I just thought he was not really all that exceptional, but he has been, he does get open. He gets open all the time. He ran some beautiful routes yesterday, made some great catches, or on Saturday. Obviously, I'm taping this on Sunday, so I slip and say the wrong day. But, he ran some beautiful routes on Saturday. He made some great catches on Saturday and just had a good game overall. He continues to do that. Sincere Lee got his first catches of the season, and they were both big plays. A great catch for a 31-yard pickup, and then a really nice 17-yard gain on 1st and 20. Both were huge plays for Pitt at those points in the game. And getting him more up to speed just makes this receiving core even more dangerous. Deuce Spann, successful again out of the Wildcat. This time he runs for a touchdown on a 4th and short. Bryce Yates had a really nice catch on a really well-run route and a great throw from Mason Heinchel. Unfortunately, it came back on a hold, but it was a really nice play design and a really nice just execution by Heinchel and Yates. It's unfortunate it came back, but he did convert a 3rd down later in the game. The receiving core just they look good. They're making plays, they're getting open, they're making catches, and Heinchel's getting the ball to them. Jake Overman caught his first touchdown of the season. They now have had 4 Pitt tight ends catch at least 1 touchdown this season. That's got to be some kind of record. I tried looking that up a while ago and just stopped. I was just you know what? I got back to a certain point, 2006 or something, and I was like, they haven't had another season with 4 tight ends catch a touchdown pass, so I'm not going to look any further. Let's all agree that it's probably the first time in Pitt history it's ever happened. And, the offensive line gave up some pressure, didn't have its best game. They had their moments, but they didn't have their best game. Kendall Stanley went out of the game with cramps. Giovanni Cooley came in and played for him. At one point, they had Ryan Coretta at center and Isaiah Montgomery at left guard for about 2 drives in the 4th quarter, and then Lyndon Cooper came back in. I didn't really catch anything on the broadcast. It made it seem like Cooper got hurt, so I'm not sure why they did that, but they did. It's the offensive line's not going to be a strength for this team. I know I gave them a B+ last week. I probably overgraded them when I did that in the mailbag. The offensive line is just not going to be a strength for Pitt this season. It is what it is, right? And so this team is at its best when they're able to get the ball out quickly in the passing game and when they're able to attack the perimeter with the run. And they've got 2 guys in Desmond Reed and Jakarian Turner who are really good perimeter runners. So That's where the strengths are offensively. Running between the tackles is not a strength offensively. And I think when they face Notre Dame and they face Georgia Tech and they face Miami, they're going to be challenged up front, and they're going to have to find new ways to get the ball out quickly and make plays, because these teams are going to get after Mason Heinchel, and it's going to be a battle. I don't think you're going to be able to get away with a lot of things you got away with against Stanford or against NC State or even against Syracuse, where they gave up 7 sacks. You're not going to be able to do that and still have success and win by 2 touchdowns or 3 scores against Notre Dame or against Miami. I don't think you're going to be able to. Maybe you will, but my guess is you won't be able to. In the end, despite 4 turnovers from Mason Heinchel, despite getting sacked twice, despite, that's kind of it. They still put up 466 yards of offense. They still scored 4 touchdowns. They were 6 of 14 on 3rd down, 2 of 2 on 4th down. They're now 10 of 10 on 4th down with Mason Heinchel as the starting quarterback. That's got to be some kind of record. They're pretty unstoppable in that situation. And, overall, just a really solid. I went into that game on Saturday thinking Pitt just needed to survive. Just find a way to get out, whether you win by 1 or you win by 20. It doesn't matter. Just get out of this West Coast trip and this final game before the off week. Get out of it with a win. However you have to do it, whatever you have to do. And it ended up being a lot easier than that. I don't know if I thought that Stanford was going to be a real challenge, but it ended up being a lot easier than that. You get another win for Mason Heinchel, another cover for Pitt since Mason Heinchel became the starting quarterback. And now they go into an off week before they dive into these final 3 games. Huge, huge stretch. I know I didn't really get into the defense, but I kind of realized we've passed the 20-minute mark just talking about offense. So I guess we'll break down the defense from the Stanford game maybe tomorrow, or maybe, probably tomorrow. And then we'll talk basketball on Wednesday, because the Pitt basketball team opens its regular season tonight against Youngstown State at the Peterson Event Center. Jim's going to be there to cover that game for us at Panther-Lair.com, so make sure you stay tuned right here on YouTube and on the website Panther-Lair.com to get all the coverage of Pitt basketball and Pitt football and Pitt recruiting and Pitt transfers and Pitt everything. And then, of course, like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com so you don't miss any of our Pitt video content. We cleared 5,000 before the game. That's awesome. Let's keep it rolling. Let's see if we can get 6,000. Huh? Think we get 6,000 subscribers by the end of the regular season? Probably not, but let's give it a go. All right. Thanks for watching today. Thanks for watching all the videos over the weekend, the postgame show, and things like that. I hope you had a great weekend. Enjoy your Monday, and we'll catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.